Hello, it's another Music Ally Focus with me, Music Ally's editor Joe Sparrow, and in this episode we're joined by Kyran de Keijzer, co-founder of Muso.AI, the music credits platform that brings together data on the people that make music and allows music professionals to edit and manage their legacy metadata. Now, Kyran says he looked at the most popular tracks ever made and then looked at the metadata associated with it that reaches streaming platforms, and he found lots of gaps. Only 60% of them have songwriting credits, 46% of them have producer credits, and only 29% have engineering credits. So we speak to him in a minute and ask him why he chose to take on one of the huge music metadata challenges. Now, what's this Music Ally Focus podcast? Well, Music Ally provides an analysis-rich and contextual guide to the music business, and we look at one meaningful story at a time, just like this one. This podcast is also going to be quick. It will last about the same amount of time as Dakiri the dog could hypothetically fetch 450 toys. Dakiri retrieved 15 in 1 minute in 2020, and while it's unclear what breed of dog Dakiri is, it's clear that she's a very good girl. Now, talking of dogged persistence, Kyran de Keijzer is trying to make sure that all of the people associated with a track are properly credited in the metadata in a verified way. So in this podcast, part of a partnership between Music Ally and Muso.AI, we wanted to hear the thoughts of someone who has spent half a decade working with music metadata and solving a problem that he says can help people not only get the credit they deserve, but open up new work opportunities and get paid better for the work they've already done. It's a great conversation, and he mentioned some really eye-opening data. So let's go over to Kyran right now. Okay, we're very happy to welcome Kyran de Keijzer, co-founder of Muso.AI, to the podcast. Hi, Kyran.
Hey, Joe. How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Now, we've covered a lot of various AI technologies that are connected to music, in Music Ally's news reporting and here on the podcast. This is one I think we haven't discussed before on the podcast, so it should be interesting. And this is how AI fits with the issue of metadata around music. Before we dig into that, can you start by explaining your personal background in relation to the music industry, sort of describe what Muso is doing in a nutshell, and why you chose to take on one of the huge challenges in the music industry, which is metadata? What's wrong with you?
Oh, so much. But I'm an engineer. I'm an artist. I started off in the studios in Los Angeles as kind of just helping out there, learning the craft. And like in a few months, I was growing into engineering all the sessions, like orchestrating everything. And I was working out of a studio called NRG Recording in North Hollywood. And they've been around for 35 years. They were kind of the go-to spot for all the new metal stuff that happened in 2000 to 2010. Think about Korn, Evanescence, Linkin Park, Papa Roach, like all of that type of stuff. That was kind of the home to all of that. And the studio owner there, Jay Baumgartner, I started working with him quite a lot on all the sessions and on all the music coming through. And I noticed that almost every single conversation that we've had with either customers, with colleagues, or people coming through the studio was around credits and how people weren't properly getting credited. Now, me being very new in the industry, like at the time, maybe have 3 years under my belt, that was quite an interesting conversation for me because that's how you get started. You have to build your resume, and coming from the digital world, like you're thinking, oh, well, how hard can that really be? But for the owner of the studio and now my co-founder, Jay, this has been a problem for 35 years. People missing out on Grammy opportunities by just not having their name on the record. People being in the room but not actually getting the credit they deserve, and sometimes even leading to ownership disputes or royalty disputes, and just this sense of not being able to build your portfolio, your resume of what you've worked on in an industry that is completely freelance is a little bit crazy. And like we just started to have those conversations with people coming through, and it turned out people got pretty emotional. Like everybody has this sob story about, oh, like I wasn't credited. Like it's like the oldest story in the book in the music industry. Every single movie highlights it. Like it's not. It is the cliche that you work on something and then somebody takes advantage of it, or like your name doesn't get mentioned. And so this seemed to be something very, very real to the people like around us, friends, colleagues, and also people coming through the studio. So like initially we said, okay, we have to do something for those people. We have to do something for our friends, for our colleagues, and make sure that they don't ever have these problems again. And so we really wanted to start off with just a simple tool to help capture credits while you're in the studio. Started to identify some problems in the chain of command on how it's captured, how it's being sent. And kind of in that journey, more and more, the platform has developed to be something bigger, to realizing like, oh, there is no one simple solution. This has to be addressed at a major scale. And it's not only that we have to solve it from or what happens in the studio, handing that over to say a label or a distributor, but also how do you handle all this legacy stuff that isn't properly documented, that isn't properly handled. And so it's kind of pivoted towards that. And there's a lot that happens in a recording session in a studio that that doesn't get properly documented. And nowadays, it's kind of okay. Like it's not like in the best spot, but now that you have the credits in Spotify, Tidal, and the producer credits and songwriting credits, people do seem to care more about it now. They do start to get covered a little bit more now, and especially because the independent distributors like a DistroKid or TuneCore, they are like allowing those credits to be sent in now. So going forward, it's not in a bad spot. I wish it was like a little bit better, but really the big issue is, and that a lot of the people that we've talked to have flagged is, okay, going forward is okay, but how do I actually fix the last 10, 15 years of my career? And that's where
that was my next question. Is that how does that happen, and what is Muso doing to sort of fix that, as you see it?
Yeah, firstly, we had a tool to capture new credits going forward on stuff that you're doing in the studio, but it was proven that that was kind of okay, and that the main problem was looking back. So then we said, okay, how can we actually solve all of this? So we started to bring in and aggregate kind of all of the industry data that you can have: catalog data, analytical data, credits data, and also the publishing data, all like in one master data set to understand, okay, what is there, where are the problems, and how can we solve it? And there were a lot of discoveries in that path. Like that's taken about 3.5 years, like just of doing that. There's so much, different data sets that are kind of unique on their own, that don't have a common identifier, that don't have a common key, like as they say in the world of software. So it's very hard to merge all of that, and it's very hard to bring it all together. The ASCAP and the BMIs, they have tried to do this just on the publishing side, and people have just kind of given up and said, no, like it can't be done. And we think that we found a way to actually properly do that, not only using the technologies that we have, but also leveraging a point of view in the industry where users and people in the industry can participate to the industry database and cleaning it up for the better. And that is where I really think the interesting part is it is not going to be a magic wand of, okay, we have an algorithm, we have something that can fix all of it. It has to be in combination with people inside of the industry wanting to solve this together. And that's where I think the opportunity is.
So obviously this is a topic that is talked about endlessly in the music industry. And as you say, with a sort of air of, I don't think this will ever be solved. There's been huge cases of people trying to make one master database of all the information and it just not working. It's clear that from the past why that happened. The data was kind of built up in different ways in different places, and everybody was doing it independently, and then that's why it got into that fragmented state. How difficult is it as a challenge to bring all that together? I mean, you said it's taken years, but I mean, can you describe it in the sense of like, it just seems to me like the ultimate nightmare to be presented with all these different data sets in different ways, and then someone saying to you, can you just make this into one spreadsheet?
Right, yeah. We see as kind of three main entities inside of the industry database that we can link everything to. So we have a profile that can be seen as an artist that is on Spotify, or somebody behind the scenes, like a songwriter, producer, engineer, like an actual individual. Then we have a track, which is just a song, which is a recording, something you would have on a CD, something that you would play on Spotify. And then you have the album, the release, kind of a collection of work of recordings and tracks together. That is how we've kind of unified it. Now, the track, the industry has done a very good job in unifying all of that on the ISRC. That is like the main identifier on which everything is merged. So when you take all these different data sets, it's very easy to find the common data points through the ISRC. So that has not been that big of an issue. There are still somewhat issues of the same track being distributed 3 or 4 times, sometimes under a radio edit or like an extended version when it really isn't the same recording, like it's just a different like version. So there is still duplicates out there, but for most of the cases, like it's actually pretty okay. Then you have the album, the release, which is on the UPC, which now on the streaming side is very well done. But back in the day when we used to still do CDs, you would have a different UPC for the same album in different regions because different regions had a different distributor. They would have a different printer for the CD, for the vinyl. So that kind of got a little bit messy. Like, see like one album has only a Japan version or a US version that have the same track list, but they have a different UPC. So when you go and view an artist's work, like you technically don't have to see those 2 different albums, but in the data they are there, right? So, but unifying that also not really the biggest issue. The unification of the profiles and mainly people behind the scenes, that's where the biggest problem is disambiguation of people, of people that have worked on a track, and that's just on the data that's there. And then we have a whole other topic of data that is not there, that wasn't properly captured. Put on the ones that are there, there have been no standards in how you send in credits for very, very long. There've only kind of been attempt to create standards in the last year and a half or so. So when you're at when you send stuff in from a DistroKid TuneCore or through your label or through whatever, there's now a field that is called the ISNI, which is the International Standard Name Identifiers. So it's meant to give an identifier to every single person behind the scenes, whether you're an engineer, songwriter, producer, or an artist.
Right. So everybody involved with a track will have a unique code, like an ISRC, exactly. And okay, that sounds useful.
But so,
and has that been driven? The creation of that has that been driven by the sort of, like you said, the streaming platforms now have the credits next to the tracks? Has it been driven from that?
Yeah, well, this has actually been driven by the streaming services themselves, because where they are at, they are a technology platform that is very dependent on the data that is being sent in from the label. So they can't really add a whole lot more to that. They are kind of at the mercy of what the label sent to them. So if the labels or the distributors send them bad data, then they get bad data. So say there's a case that we've been talking about for quite a while. Say that Spotify or Apple Music, they want to enhance their algorithms. They want to say, okay, if you like 3 songs in a row that were produced by me, that means maybe you want to listen to more songs that were produced by me. Okay, but in order to do that on the technical side, in Spotify's data, they would have to have an identifier for me. They would have to have a unique number for me to be able to do that filtering, to be able to do those algorithms. And if they don't get that from the labels, they can't actually touch any of that data because they don't own the rights to that data, because the rights holder in the end is the label, is the distributor. So it's very hard to kind of innovate and to improve the services when you're always dependent on what is coming from the labels. That is one. But 2, like if you actually do have some very cool use cases, some very cool things that can be done on the consumption side, on the streaming side, now you have to turn to the labels and say, okay, we want these types of fields, we want these types of data to increase our service. And the labels aren't really set up to do this kind of stuff. They're not technology companies, right? Like they can't do this at scale. So they maybe do this for their top 1%, for the Drakes, for the Ariana Grande. They'll have a team and they'll work on their catalogs. But the bottom 90, 95%, it's way too much manual work to actually do that for their whole catalog. So every single time there's new innovation, there's always this question of, how do we do this for the whole catalog? And that's where something like with what we're doing can actually help and come in and help do it on the catalog wide for the other 95% that you don't want to do manually, and help your whole catalog to move over to like a more modern set that can be leveraged on the consumption side.
So you I think you've touched on this a little bit, but what is your sort of take on the state of music metadata? Because you've mentioned this issue about people not being credited, and it's an ongoing issue, that there's been some changes recently. I'm asking you this in terms of, in a sort of general sense, about the state of music metadata, because whenever I whenever we write anything about music metadata or publish a podcast on it, I generally get a few very passionate emails afterwards of people saying, no, actually, it's like this. And everybody has very sort of passionate views on the state of the data. So I'm not asking for a screed from you, but some people think it's chaos, it's terrible, and it needs scrapping and starting again. Some people think actually it's all right, thanks very much. Where do you sort of sit in that spectrum?
So I think that the numbers speak for itself. So of what I have like in front of me here are some of the coverage numbers that we see inside of the industry database that we found, bringing all of these different data sets together. Now, what we've done in our data set is we've divided it into a rank 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A rank 1 being the 0.01% of the whole like industry, the top 50,000 tracks that have ever been created and streamed and stuff. So that is like our the peak of the pyramid, and that should, in theory, have the most pristine quality, right? And then a rank 2 is the 1%, a rank 3, 10%, a rank 4, 30%, and rank 5 is the bottom 60% that only has 100 streams or so, 1,000 streams that people don't really care too much about. But like 95% of all the consumption on the streaming services is the top 1% of music. So technically that should be a very good example of how the rest should look. So looking at the 0.1% of the industry, the most popular tracks ever made, only 60% have songwriting credits.
Oh no. Okay.
and only 29% have engineering credits.
Right.
So like even like in the different categories, like songwriting is the most important one because it touches the copyrights and everything. Now, this doesn't mean that ASCAP or BMI or that the publisher doesn't have it. It's probably well documented who the copywriter is, but the point is, it's not ending on the places where people consume music is really the issue here. So a 60% on songwriter, 46 producer, 26% musician, engineer 29%, and what is kind of interesting is we also have a category called the visual credits, who did the music video or the album art. 4.2% coverage on that.
Wow.
So, just at the coverage numbers alone, like you can see, okay, well, it's not really like in a great state. Then you can argue, okay, just the fact that a song has a songwriting credit doesn't mean that it's accurate. It just means that it's there. So there's also how accurate, like, is that 60% also,
So you've answered my question quite clearly there, actually, which is that there's quite a lot of work to be done in terms of bringing in, even if we ignore accuracy, just bringing in data that answers all the questions that people have around the people who create music. And then you've got a separate task of making sure it's correct. But we'll save that one for
sure.
we'll park that one for a moment. So tell us then how the Muso process works. So you've sort of touched on it a bit, but how does this sit in the production line to make sure all these boxes are filled in with the appropriate people and the credits? And can you explain as well how this AI process fits into there as well and what it does?
Yeah, sure. So what we do is we take in all the data that is currently on the streaming services that are on all of these different data points, and that is called the legacy credits. So anything that is currently on Spotify, on Apple, that's called legacy. Anything that people are currently now working on in the studio is the unreleased. So we only handle what is on the legacy databases. So we bring all of that in. There are some processes that we do on the merging that kind of create a master data set that is already in a somewhat better place. And then users come onto the platform, they are able to add or modify the data they see for themselves. They're able to change things that are wrong or add stuff to it. And then those changes get added on top of the master data set. And that together, so the master data set and the changes is what is able to be consumed by our data customers. And that can be through API or that could be through the data feed. So we have currently data customers, some DSPs, some CMOs that are directly consuming the data from us, and that means the actual master data set of things that we have merged together, but then mainly the changes to the master data set that our users have done on our platform. To date, last year, we have done 1.4 million changes on the master data set just on credits and participation alone. And those changes are then being consumed and shared to our data partners. So it's our main goal. Okay, well, let's bring in all the industry data. and let's make changes to it, and then let's have those changes flow to the places that the industry cares about, the CMOs,
Right.
the other streaming services, and give it the proper identifiers to be used on innovation and all those other stuff that I mentioned. So kind of having a source of truth that the industry can rely on to build more stuff on, really.
And who are the people that will come and make these edits? You're saying that people, your participants, participants in the recordings will come and make changes about, oh, well, hey, actually, I did this and I did this for this. But so are you welcoming in everybody in the production chain to either add themselves or change things in that data set around, let's say, a song? And how do you verify that it's true?
Yep. Well, that is the main question that we always get, is how can you validate all these changes that are happening to the system? So you have 4 different layers that we have, and the data consumers can choose which layer they want to consume. So the very first layer is, you're a user, you come onto Muso and you find your own profile that is inside of the industry DB, and you say, hey, that is me. But you go through what we call a claiming process. So you log in to your Facebook page, like Instagram page or Twitter page, to showing, hey, this is me. This is proof that this is me, and I want to make changes on this profile. So after that is done, you're on what we call the L1 level of verification, and now you can make changes to your name, your biography, your like profile picture, and this is just you say, okay, this is me, and I'm making changes to me. Then say that you were left off on the track that I did, like you were left off. You say, hey, I was in fact the engineer on a track that I did. Now, since I already have credit on that, I can bring you on. So the second layer is like collaborator verification. So people that are already credited, who have also claimed the profile, can vouch for you, can bring you on to that track. That is the second level. The third level is if the artist on the track, who also does the verification, but say that it's the Weeknd or somebody on the Weeknd's team that has proven that they have access to the Weeknd artist profile, they have said, yes, this is also true. So it brings it to a level 3. And then the last one is the rights holder. So now when the label and publisher gets involved, can be brought into an L4. Now, say that we have a data customer that is a CMO. They might only want to consume the L4 data because it's just the rights holder data, especially when it comes to the royalties. They tend to only want the L4 data. But if we are talking about, like a platform that just wants to bring in, we have one platform where you can hire engineers, and it's like a gig website. They don't really care for the L4 data. They just want the L1 data. That's fine, like it's more. So a data customer is on their own right, however they want to use it. If it's meant for royalties or copyright, we recommend to use the L4. But if it's just like a more broad, wide industry discovery thing, then it can be done like on the L1. So really, we've leveraged not only removing the bottleneck for verifying this on the label, the rights holder side, because that's not going to happen. So we brought in the artist, and we saw even that like it's hard to get to like an Ariana Grande, Beyonce, but really the other people in the room, they're much more like approachable. They can vouch for you, they can bring you on, and they're probably more easily to reach as well. Some of the issues that we found with some of the other crediting platforms is if there are problems, then you have to contact the label who has to redistribute. And we had a case like in the studio actually where a assistant engineer didn't get credit on a Beyonce track. Now, this assistant engineer who's only in the room, like setting up everything, now suddenly has to contact Beyonce's label to redistribute with her name on it. Just never going to happen. You know what I mean? So, but now Jay, who was in the room, he was able to vouch for her because he did have that credit on there. So he can bring her on. And that way she actually did end up having that credit. So it's just using the current industry data, even though the coverage is low, like as we said, but there is coverage, using that to increase it to the other 100 or hopefully 100% in all the areas.
Yeah, right. You can connect with people that you do know or people that can verify that you were involved. And then all of a sudden, you don't have just one point of truth, which is the label. You have lots of different ones.
Exactly.
Their trust is verified in the system. And so their trust can also verify individual data points throughout that process as well. Okay. And what about the AI process that you involve? AI is used so broadly now as a sort of I'm not saying you're using it as a buzzword, but I've seen it used as buzzwords.
Definitely,
And how is it specifically working in this case to make this data better?
Usually on AI or ML, you need to have what is called the reference data, which is a data set, a very large one that is super clean, that the AI or the ML can reference as, okay, this is the truth. This is my model. This is what I have to learn from. But in music, this is kind of difficult because as we see, the industry data is not entirely accurate. So it can't be used as like a learning grounds to then predict or do confidence off of. So what we've now done is we've looked at all the transactions that are happening on our platform, all the verifications, those 1.4 million credits that have been added last year and that have been verified. Those are now ground for what is considered the truth, and that is our learning model. So the more like of those transactions that happen, the ML and the AI is then meant to learn from that and then to make predictions or to make confidence ratios. So say that you were to come on board day one, you have 0 credits, and you say that you wrote for Justin Bieber. Well, there is a confidence ratio in the background that says that it looks at all the data points on your profile, that looks at all the transactions that have been proven, and then it can compare and say, okay, what is the confidence that Joe did in fact work with Justin Bieber based on his current work? Well, the confidence is now 0 because you have 0 credits, and nobody has ever worked with Beyonce that has 0 credits.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
So I mean, there you have that, but it's both using people that you have worked with in the past. Say that you've worked with Jay, who has worked with Beyonce. Now the likelihood of you being in that room is like a little bit higher. Right? So it uses all the actual related data points of the accurate transactions that we have validated to give confidence ratios from that can be used by people to bring them on to a higher level of verification. We don't want to be in the place where we say, okay, this is the actual final truth, but more give confidence ratios to the industry of can you trust that what this is here being said? We say that it has a very high likelihood of like being accurate based on the data.
So when changes come in, you're never going to get perfect with such massive sets of data. But you're saying that we have this starting point, which is not great actually, and we can welcome in this new data, and then we can give a sort of score of how likely that is to be actually closer to truth, and then it should improve over time.
Exactly, but it's still up to the rights holder or the artist or the other people that currently have credit on that track to say, okay, I will bring you on. We can just give you the confidence and
right.
Okay, but even if it has a 14% confidence, if the label says yes, this is true, okay, well then it's true, right? Like you're still, we don't want to be in the role like of being the arbiter, like of what's saying was true, but more like holding up a mirror, like allowing all of this to be more transparent, to get proper insights from it, and to make it more discoverable than what it is now, rather than saying, oh no, this is right and like this is wrong.
Yeah. So the rights holder or whoever has the ultimate say is presented with a much easier situation where they can just say yes, no to your suggestions. Okay, great. How long have you been running Muso now as a service?
It's been 5 years. 5 years now.
Yeah, okay, which is a pretty substantial piece of time to be working in this space and with that data. So what do you see as your primary successes in that time?
The first year and a half was we just had a tool, almost like a plugin for your DAW to capture credits in the session. Then we pivoted from that to do it to entire legacy catalog wide, and that was already like a huge benefit to people. And then just last year, we've added an analytical component to the system where any single producer, songwriter, or just any profile like in our database is able to see the performance of their credits streaming wise for their whole body of work. So now suddenly Jay, who is always behind the scenes, he doesn't have access to Spotify for artists. He doesn't have access to analytics. He can now see, all of my credits together have 10 billion streams lifetime. And so he's like, wow, like I never knew that. So he's now like able to see what his work has actually done. He's able to place himself in the market, can compare himself, justify his rates. We've heard of people that have been able to increase their rates by 300 per session, 400 per session, just because now they have somewhat of an idea of where they place themselves in the market. So that has been very interesting. And then secondly, we've also seen people that now have access to these streaming analytics on their credits to be able to reconcile that with their royalty statements and say, hold on a second, this is streaming a lot more than I thought it would be, but there's something missing here. And even my partner Jay has been able to find, was it like 250 grand of unpaid royalties just of having the insights of his credits. And he saw that one album was streaming way more than he was getting the royalty statements for. So he was able to audit the label, and they didn't pay him out for 70 years or so. They said they sent him a few letters, or his banking information wasn't right, but they kind of just sat on the money for like 7 years, and then he was paid out those that at 200 grand. And we've had 6 or 7 stories of that from users now that have on their own use the insights from the data to actually make real world changes in their lives. And that's something that I'm very proud of to have been able to enable for these people. And also, this is not something coming from us. Like, we never said that you could do this for royalties, but they've kind of taken this upon themselves to do. So that's something that I'm very excited in to learn more about, and how we can do this at a more larger scale for some of the other people. And then lastly, what I've seen, and this is something that I've started to talk about pretty recently, is how these analytics that I talked about is shown now to be the reason why people care about having their credits accurate. Is they come into music, they want to see that number, the streaming number, and now they care about making their credits accurate, going in, solving things, adding things that are missing. Whereas before, the option is still there, but the reward is only that your credits are accurate and it looks cool, like on a profile, like on a portfolio. But if that's it, that's not enough of a carrot, not enough of a motivation to get people to go through all the work. Because it is kind of like doing your taxes in a way. Like, you have to make sure that things are accurate. It takes time. It's some admin work, right? And if there's not a proper reward at the end, it feels like you're, oh sure, like I'll do it one day, like I'll do it one day, like I'll do it off. But now that we're actually getting people excited about doing it because of the analytics at the end of it that they are able to see, that they're able to use to increase their rates, to justify themselves in the market, reconcile royalties. So that, I think, is very exciting. And I think as an industry as a whole, we have to make it very easy to engage with, and have a reward structure in place for people contributing to the industry database. It can't just be that one platform does it all and reaps the rewards. We also don't really want to do that. It has to be an approach that we all take to contribute to a cleaner set of industry data that we can all be proud of, because we're all in this together.
What does the future hold then in a world where there is better metadata? So let's say your sort of grand vision happens and Muso is able to really level up all the data around everybody who's involved in songs. Many more people who are involved at every level of creation of a track have their credits recorded somewhere that goes and fed out into industry partners. What does that future music ecosystem and industry look like, where more people have more credits that are more accurate?
I see it in a few different categories. The one mainly that comes to mind is the educational piece, is that people understand their data, they understand where their money comes from, where their royalty comes from, what the copyright and ownership is, and how they should be aware of that, and how that is an asset for them. A lot of the people that I've spoken to, even 25 years in the industry, 30 years in the industry, they don't know enough about how they make their money, which is, if you compare to any other industry, that's a little bit shocking. So really, one is that we're all very educated on how we make money inside of the music industry, how the copyrights work, and how my work contributes to that on a daily basis. Second is the discovery. If you ever hear something that is cool, if you want to work with somebody that is in a certain genre or that is on a certain part of the world, it should be really easy to find that person through all the work that is out there and to work with them. So the collaboration piece, if you want to do that at a worldwide scale, like you need to be able to have the data to properly find those people and to be able to work with them. And to thirdly, to further increase the experiences that consumers can have with music. There's one interesting piece of conversation that we've had with one of the streaming services that uses the voice recognition. So what you would have in the Alexa speakers or like Siri, and they said what we want to know, or what we want to understand from the artist, is how does the artist pronounce their own name. So
Right.
like you have certain names. So say like ACDC, right? If like Alexa says it is AC/DC, like it doesn't understand that it's ACDC. Or like you have like some other artists that are very hard to understand just from how it's spelled to how it should be sound. So if a consumer says, "Hey, play me some XXX Nation," then somehow Siri or like Alexa has to understand who that is. So if the streaming services say, "Hey, we want this type of data," that we can come in and help connect that bridge to the people inside of the industry to backfill some of that data, that they are not dependent on having to go to the label, because then all of those innovations will just never happen, because the labels and the infrastructure, they're just not set up to be able to do that on a large catalog level. And I believe that's where we can come in to really supercharge or engage a lot of these cool user experiences that we can have with music.
Great. And if people are listening and think, okay, I want to check this out and see if I can either use it or get involved and update my own information or whatever, where should they go online to do this?
You can go to our site, Muso.AI, and we're also inside of the App Store. That is our main platform. So both the App Store and Google Play Store, Muso.AI, and it's pretty straightforward. It takes you through all the steps, and you will be able to create an account there and see your insights, see your credits, and make contributions to it.
Great. I'll link to that beneath the podcast so they can just jump straight across and see it. And before you go, Kyran, one question that I've been asking a lot of people recently. If, hypothetically, you could only have one piece of music to listen to, what would it be?
That's a good question.
It can be an album if you really want to compromise there.
Really?
But,
Okay.
Yeah. Or it can be an individual song. Your call.
So it would have to be a nostalgic album for me that brings me a lot of positive memories, and probably Minutes to Midnight by Linkin Park, their third album. That was a really big album for me, like in high school, that took me through like a lot of those years. So probably that one.
Yeah, sure. I think a completely understandable choice. I will link to that as well beneath the podcast. Okay, so Kyran, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.
And there we go. So if you found that useful, please share this podcast on with someone else who you think will also get something out of it. And if you'd like to email me and give me your thoughts, it's joe@musically.com. That's joe@musically.com. Don't forget, we have a free weekly email called The Knowledge, which rounds up a bit of this and a bit of that, of the best analysis, news, marketing, insight, and skills from Music Ally. There's a link below the podcast, so sign up and impress your boss. And don't forget as well, you can check out to see if you are eligible for a free Music Ally subscription. That link is also beneath the podcast. So that's it from me, Joe Sparrow. Until next time, farewell.